We kick off with Kentucky, where as you see, it had snowed, and the night before we had actually tried to fly out here, but the winds had been pretty high, and then of course overnight we got all the snow. The main reason for this site was actually because of the corn maze that you see there, and that's quite well known for that maze in this area, and we're very fortunate that the farmer was happy to allow us to use this. But it really was, it was bitterly cold, and perhaps one of the colder flights that I had throughout the entire course of my trips. As you see, we actually had some drone footage here as well, which was super cool. And then on to Ohio, and this was actually shot the same day as Kentucky, so it's kind of crazy how different the weather was. You see it was absolutely stunning, but it was here with Brandon McLeod and David Wolf from Paramotor Crazy, and of course the Tri-State Skywalkers. And this was, while it was a little bumpy from time to time, the sunset here was just absolutely beautiful. Of course, it was also here while I was in Ohio that old David Wolf took me out for lunch, and then we're going to keep giving him a hard time about it just for fun. So from there, of course, I actually did go back to Florida for the Palm Bay fly-in, and then just as COVID was kicking off, I headed north and came up to Maryland here. And as you see, this was kind of a one and done state, not particularly interesting, but I found this private little airfield out here in Maryland, and I met up with a couple local pilots that store their planes at this private airport, and so it was very quickly done. I had actually done 2 locations up there. So from there, I headed up to Delaware that night, parked outside here overnight, and then the next morning waited here for the weather to improve. And of course, people were kind of getting scared at this point, so I was very, very surprised and pleased to see that, as you'll see towards the end here, there were about 8 or so people that all came out, and actually later on even did a donation in recognition of the 50x challenge. So this was just very, very inspiring.
Oh no.
Oh.
Right on the reserve.
Well, as you can see, I met Tucker in Pennsylvania instead of New Jersey, and that was a strategic move because of what was going on with COVID.
One problem I frequently run into with my chase cam is that I don't get the framing just right. I have to set the angle of the camera to get the entire glider in the view, but with a 360 camera, that's never an issue because you can frame it wherever you want. You can zoom in and out.
So as you see, it was pretty cool. We got to do our wingtip bump. It had actually been a little rowdy earlier that day, and Tucker had gone up and decided to come back down, so I was glad that he was the dummy for the day. And anyway, we got Pennsylvania done first, and as you see, it ended with this coming down this waterfall and then going back. I actually cracked the exhaust right on the way down there. And then on that same day, we actually did this part of the flight first. Flew from Pennsylvania out into New Jersey, and had some time here in New Jersey. Just as you see, beautiful fog in the valley here, and then was able to go in for a landing here and then take off again. So as you see, this is also, we had a little bit of a drone catch in here with my buddy Nevada. We actually got to stay out at his farm for a little bit, and then this part of New Jersey is well known for this particular part of the Delaware River. and this particular power plant, and sort of ended off with a nice little foot dip. So on to Connecticut. I had hoped to connect with several pilots out here, but COVID had kind of got everybody pretty scared at this point. So I came here, camped out at this little airport, didn't see anybody for a first day and a half here, and then I was fortunate enough to meet these two guys here that were my witnesses. On to Rhode Island. I had the opportunity to connect with Ron, and so he was super cool. Even played tour guide for me, and we followed each other in each other's car and had the phone line open, and so he was very, very kind to show me his old stomping grounds, not only here in Rhode Island but also out in Massachusetts. This area was absolutely beautiful, as you see, beautiful waters, and just a huge opportunity to come fly next to all these mansions here. And I was fortunate enough to get off the ground, but unfortunately Ron didn't. I had a short in my throttle cable, and that's what caused the engine out here, and so I just went ahead and landed here and was able to just set up, and then as you see went ahead and launch here. So I landed in somebody's backyard and it just took off again. It's kind of fun, really. So on to Massachusetts. Old Johnson Q decided to come and hang out with us, which I was very appreciative. I had met him down in Palm Bay at Aviator, and as you see, we were being super careful here, sanitizing each other, and but of course it was very much about all the flying, and just to be able to fly over the water here. Nice short takeoff here right off the beach, but we all managed to pull it off, and I had a lot of fun out here, and girls on the beach, and what else can you say? It's just this was very, very beautiful, and I'm so appreciative to Ron to get me set up here. I had a place to camp. We had to wait for weather for several days, and he had set me up with a place with a camper at a local church, and his wife was kind enough to even cook meals for he and I, and so while everyone was starting to feel pretty isolated at this point, Ron really just made a big difference for me there. Here on to Maine, Johnson Q and another pilot decided to come up here, and of course this was my most northern or northeastern point, and we came out here to fly, and as you see we had probably one of the largest full moons of the year, and so we got to fly from the airport, come across into this farm area, scoot around there for a while, and then come back an hour later. This was already fairly late, but the full moon sort of made it absolutely fantastic. So from there on to New Hampshire, and as you see, this footage here, a lot of it is actually being captured by them and edited, and so I had to keep some of it in here because it was just so incredibly well edited, and I'm very grateful to the team out there for doing that, and so we had a lot of fun. So from there out to Vermont, as you know, I'd had some furnace problems, so my first day out here was pretty cold, but I was very fortunate that my connections here were able to get me actually onto the airport and hooked up with some electricity, and The one thing I will mention about this is that you should always listen to your local pilots, because they had told me that they don't take off here unless there's zero wind, because otherwise it's just too rowdy. And so we flew in the morning, and we thought we'd try again that afternoon, and I took off the ground when it was about I don't know, maybe 2 miles an hour, and by the time I hit 300-400 feet, I got launched literally, where I was climbing 300-400 feet a minute very, very quickly. And basically this airport sits in a bowl, and all I can say is listen to your local pilots, because they do know best. So on to New York, and I thought this was going to be my toughest state to go fly in, and I was incredibly surprised to chat with one guy and say, hey, I'm coming out there, and he said, well, I'm going to come down and fly with you there. And then he brought 5 other people with him, and so we're here, and it was just so heartwarming at this point of what was going on in COVID, that the paramotor community says, we know everything that's going on, but we're coming out to support you, and we're going to be careful, and we'll come out here and fly. And so the first evening, as you see, we're a whole bunch of us here. We all went out and flew, and the weather wasn't amazing. It was a little bumpy up there from time to time, but we all got several good flights in, and then it did actually settle down towards the end of the evening. And then of course everyone stayed overnight and either slept in their cars or slept in a tent. And as you see, it had snowed overnight, and so I really was, this was so amazing that these guys stuck around and supported me here, because the weather was pretty cold that morning. And we got to do one final location out not far from Buffalo before I headed on to Michigan. And so out here in Michigan, hung out here with Justin, I think, and he and one other pilot came out, and so we got to fly around this local area. And then I went on to Traverse City, which is where this footage is from, and once again, just the Midwest is so heartwarming. It was actually pretty cold this morning, and there were still icicles on the edge of the bay here. So on to Wisconsin, as you see here, here at Pioneer Field at Oshkosh, connected with John, and here he drops in, photobombs me here. But thanks to him, I got to do an interview with EAA, and it hasn't been published yet, but at some point they will go ahead and publish that story. And then we went back to Green Bay, hung out with Mark Amundsen, and I got to fly a free ride for the first time, and I really did want to just take it with me, because it was incredibly easy to fly, and I think this was like a 19, and later it flew a 16 as well. But I had an absolute blast, and we even went and did one more flight out to one of the lakes, and then came back here and actually saw this traffic stop going on. And then I noticed that the guy had done a runner, and so I kind of played air support here for a little while and circled overhead, and I was busy telling the story to John when the family showed up and told us all about it. So my last stop was on to the Martin family, and here I got to fly with High Five PPG. They're a family of 5 or 6 pilots who all fly. So on my first day here, old Scott comes by on the one wheel with the surfboard in the middle of the country, so we decided to spoof this, and it was pretty funny. From there, as you see, a whole bunch of people did come out the next day to come fly with us, and I got to fly the BGD and a Parajet here, and I really liked this wing, and it was actually very, very fast on my cross-country back to his airfield. Of course, that grass is immaculate, and well, Scott has a bit of a green finger from his background in doing grass for golf courses, so it's a hell of a field to go learn on. From there on to Iowa, I got to try Adam's motor here. This is something he's working with some people to develop, and I think it's a 200cc if I remember correctly. The engine had a lot of power, and I actually really enjoyed flying it. I wasn't here in Ohio very long because I had made plans to head up to Minnesota, And so we buzzed around here for about, I don't know, 45 minutes. As you see, there was a lot of cloud, and it actually sprinkled on us a couple times, but it cleared up just long enough for Adam to get one tandem flight out with some people that had showed up and were one of the witnesses there.
Shut up and sit down.
So on to Minnesota. As you see, I corrected the title here in the narrated version. I got to fly the APCO F1 here, and as you'll see here shortly, I cranked up the speed something crazy, and while I don't think the speedometer is 100% correct, you'll see that I hit pretty close, I think 69 or 68 miles an hour here in one of the spirals, and pull some pretty solid G's. So I was pretty amazed with what I got to see here, and really enjoyed flying the wing. This is another one of these sunset flights, and got to fly with this colorful PPC as well, that you'll see here shortly. Overall, fun evening, and I was very grateful to have the opportunity to fly that wing and with the great guys that did show up here. So from here out to North Dakota. So Wade was kind enough to host me here in North Dakota. We did our first morning flight out here at Castleton, but as you'll see here very, very shortly, the amazing flight came that afternoon down at a different airport. And here he's actually telling me a story about this truck which had survived 9/11, so there's quite a bit of history. So here we are down at Sky Haven, and just an amazing day, another full moon, perfect weather, and an amazing sunset. And this is where I also get to chase this train here, and probably one of the most amazing pieces of footage from the trip. So just an exciting time for me. So on to Nebraska. Got to hang out with Josh here at Nebraska PPG, and I was very fortunate. I got to fly a Carve 16, I think, for here, and then flew the Warp, and I think one other wing, if I remember correctly. But beautiful first afternoon there, got some good flying in, and this field once again is incredibly manicured, and so I just had a blast here. The next morning was a little bit cold, but the final evening, as you see here, we've got this beautiful weather, nice sunsets, and got to really just hang out and chat around. We sat around a fire and had some libations, and really just enjoyed talking about paramotoring and shooting the breeze. So from there to South Dakota, and of course this is where I flew Mount Rushmore. Don't recommend trying to do this unless you know what you're doing. There really are no outs, and this took a fair amount of planning. We did it at a time when there were not many people around, and I was very fortunate to have Dan and Tanner be able to help support me and make that happen. And Tanner is a member of the reservation here, so he was able to get us out to be able to launch and land here at the reservation out on the Badlands. And so I'm very grateful for his help to have that privilege to be able to go do something like that. As you see, it's just amazing topography, and a huge honor to have that opportunity. On to Wyoming, and so from here, as you know, I flew Devil's Tower to begin with. As you see there, a bit of rain, so I got definitely rained on to begin with, and still a fair amount of cloud and rainbows and so forth, but I have a great time to begin with here and get the footage I'm looking for. I wasn't able to make it all the way out there as I had hoped. There is actually a controlled airspace there, and as you see the rain in the distance there, and then finally a whole bunch of lightning, and yet over here there's just beautiful weather. But on my way down here it did get really bumpy as I came down through some thermal, and it's one of the few occasions I had wished that I actually did have a reserve. So I then went on to Buffalo, Wyoming, and this is where I hung out with Ray and his family, and just a beautiful area to go and fly. Didn't get to do the free flying I was hoping to do here, but we had this afternoon, came out here and I got to fly over this lake, and then we flew towards the mountains later on over a couple days. And so I think this segment's a little bit longer because there were just so many cool things to go fly here, and I think I spent 5 or 6 days, and thanks to Ray actually I didn't get stranded here because the leaf spring on my camper had come apart because of the shrapnel on my tire, and that's a whole other story. But thanks to Ray I got that welded up and was able to move on from there out and go to Yellowstone. And of course, if you've seen any of those videos, you saw I had a wonderful time there with no traffic, and it was just super cool. So from there to Montana and Team Fly Halo, and here I got to fly the Cougar 3, which you know, I'm very once again grateful to have had the opportunity to fly. This was a bigger glider than what Tucker flew and had a problem with, but once again, just look at how beautiful this area is, and what a privilege it is to live here. All these guys were actually out here on the lake, and actually hydrofoil, and so that's something I'd love to come back and give it a try out here. But several days, and thanks to these guys, just had an absolute awesome time. So came on here to Washington, and this is of course the final state in the contiguous, and Tyson was very kind enough to hook me up here, and he had several different wings. I think I flew well, you can see for yourself, right? I flew 4 wings back to back here over the course of the afternoon, and then we sort of went out here and just to enjoy a little bit of the area, did a little wingtip bump, and then on the way back, of course, I got to photograph the mountain in the distance, which I think Mount Rainey, if I remember correctly. Alaska, the final frontier. So this was the flight that officially created the completion of the 50-state tour, to be the first paramotor pilot to fly in all 50 states. I took off the spit here in Homer, Alaska, and I got a little bit of altitude, so you could see it here. Nice late. That was about 9 o'clock in the evening too. Next morning here, of course, we come out and we fly all along the coastline, and then we come all the way around Homer, and you get to see the whole view of the airport, and down here to the boatyard, and then of course a few days later we actually fly all the way up to the glacier. This is looking back towards Homer, and then actually go ahead and fly all the way up to the glacier itself. And this glacier used to come all the way down, and it's shrunk back pretty substantially over the last 20 years, and probably in about 10 years from now it won't be around. So this was a huge opportunity to come do this, and I connected with a few people, and hopefully maybe even get to do a flight later this year from Anchorage all the way down to Homer with a little bit of support along the way. So exciting stuff. Here we are in Homer, Alaska. I have just finished the flight that completes the 50 challenge and hopefully sets this record. So with that, thank you very much everyone for coming out and being witnesses. Great people. I don't know, are you guys all from Homer?
I'm from Homer, yes.
Okay, great. So
Got some locals here for you.
here we go. I guess I'll publish this all live. Thank you very much. Well, hey everybody. I'm so glad to be finally finishing off this video. It took a little bit longer than I was anticipating, but there was so much good material from the second 25 states and through some very interesting times here in the world in general. As most of you know, I covered the final 23 states all the way through COVID-19, and I know a lot of people were absolutely amazed of how I did that. And so as always, I really want to just thank the paramotor community for the support and the help that I had along the way, being able to stay at a couple of airports and then even having people allow me to park in their driveways and their backyards and helping me out with electricity so that I could put some of the videos together and Wi-Fi and so forth. So I'm exceptionally grateful. I really I had some great times with some great people along the way. And certainly, being able to fly in a few places were just incredible. Huge opportunities to spend some time at Pioneer Field, in Oshkosh, certainly flying Mount Rushmore and the Badlands, Devil's Tower, and a glacier even in Alaska. Just a few of these so amazing places to go. And if you haven't seen it already, make sure you go and watch when I went and summited Mount Shasta just a couple of days ago. So I hope to keep doing some of these amazing trips and get to fly some very, very cool places and keep doing that. And hopefully I might get to put a few more videos together from this trip that are more about maybe documentary style, some of the behind the scenes stuff, and then even share maybe some of the things that didn't work out so well, that didn't show up in those videos. So with that, I really want to thank everybody for following along. Make sure that you stay subscribed and click the bell, because I'm going to keep posting to this channel, and I'm really looking forward to trying to figure out the next trip. I've been talking about a pretty amazing trip that would be about 3,000 miles, and if I can get the sponsorship to go do it, and I can figure out how to do it safely and quickly, it could be an absolutely amazing thing to go do. So with that, a very, very big thank you to everybody, and I'm looking forward to flying with as many more people as I can in the coming months. So thank you, and thank you.